If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more captivating narratives that will transport you to worlds of emotion and revelation. Now, let's begin our journey. The Winters family Christmas dinner had always been a pristine affair. Crystal glasses catching the light of candles, polished silverware laid out with military precision, and Margaret's famous roast turkey, its skin bronzed and crackling, waiting to be carved at the center of the table. But this year, something was different. The air felt heavier, charged with unspoken words. Henry Winters sat at the head of the table, his 72-year-old frame still imposing, despite the slight stoop that had developed over the past few years. His eyes, though, those piercing blue eyes that had once commanded boardrooms and raised 3 children, now carried a distant look that his son Michael had been noticing more and more. "Dad, could you pass the gravy?" Emma, Henry's youngest daughter, asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Henry continued staring at his plate, fork suspended midway to his mouth. "Dad?" Emma repeated, louder this time. Henry's head snapped up, his expression momentarily confused before recognition dawned. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, reaching for the gravy boat and passing it with a slightly trembling hand. Michael exchanged a look with his wife, Sophia. It was the 3rd time tonight Henry had drifted away during conversation. Michael had been cataloguing these moments for months now. The forgotten appointments, the repeated stories, the confusion over simple tasks. Around the table sat the entire Winters clan, Michael and Sophia with their teenage children, Tyler and Olivia, Emma and her husband David, and the eldest son, Richard, who had flown in from Seattle with his partner James. Henry's sister, Aunt Martha, completed the gathering, her watchful eyes missing nothing as she sipped her wine. The Christmas tree in the corner of the dining room sparkled with ornaments collected over decades, handmade childhood crafts next to elegant crystal angels. Outside, snow fell gently, blanketing the Connecticut estate in silence. "Remember that Christmas when Dad dressed as Santa and got stuck in the chimney?" Richard laughed, attempting to lighten the mood. "That was Uncle George, dear," Aunt Martha corrected gently. "Henry was always too dignified for such shenanigans." "No, it was definitely Dad," Michael insisted. "I remember because Mom had to call the fire department and they took pictures for their holiday newsletter." Henry frowned. "That never happened." "Dad, we have the photos in the album," Emma said, her voice soft. "You were stuck for almost an hour." "I think I'd remember if I got stuck in my own chimney," Henry replied, an edge creeping into his voice. He stabbed at a piece of turkey with unnecessary force. Silence descended on the table, broken only by the clinking of silverware against china. Michael could feel it building inside him, the frustration, the fear, the words he'd been rehearsing for weeks. "How's the foundation work going, Dad?" Olivia asked, her 16-year-old face bright with genuine interest in her grandfather's charitable organization. Henry brightened. "Excellent! We just approved funding for 3 new scholarships for engineering students." His voice grew animated as he described the latest initiatives of the Winters Family Foundation, the philanthropic organization he had built after retiring from his engineering firm. Michael watched his father closely. The foundation was Henry's pride and joy, his second act in life after a distinguished career. The thought of his father losing that too made Michael's chest tighten. As Margaret brought in the Christmas pudding, flames dancing blue around its dark surface, Michael made his decision. He couldn't wait any longer. He cleared his throat and stood, wine glass in hand. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. The family raised their glasses expectantly, smiles automatic. To family, to Christmas, and to facing difficult truths together. Something in his tone made the smiles falter. Henry's eyes narrowed slightly. "Dad," Michael continued, turning to face his father directly, "we need to talk about what's been happening. The forgotten names, the missed appointments, the confusion." "Michael," Sophia whispered, warning in her voice. But Michael couldn't stop now. We all think, that you should see Dr. Ramirez. There are treatments now, ways to slow down the progression. Progression of what exactly?" Henry's voice was dangerously quiet. Michael took a deep breath. "Dad, I think you're losing your mind." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Emma gasped. Richard stared at his plate. Aunt Martha closed her eyes briefly. Henry set down his fork with deliberate care. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, for what seemed like hours but was merely seconds. Then, unexpectedly, a small, serene laugh escaped Henry's lips. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't the reaction he had anticipated. Anger, denial, perhaps, but not this calm amusement. "Thank you for the diagnosis, Doctor," Henry replied with perfect composure, breaking the tension in the room. His eyes, suddenly clear and sharp as they'd ever been, fixed on Michael with unsettling intensity. "But what seems like confusion to you might simply be distraction." He dabbed his lips with his napkin and stood, smoothing his Christmas sweater. "Since we're sharing difficult truths at Christmas dinner, perhaps it's time I shared one of my own." The family sat frozen as Henry moved to the sideboard and opened the drawer, retrieving a slim manila folder. Michael felt Sophia's hand find his under the table, squeezing tightly. "For the past 18 months, Henry began, his voice measured and clear, "I've been involved in something that required a great deal of my attention. Something that, yes, occasionally made me seem distracted or forgetful." He returned to the table but remained standing, the folder placed carefully before him, his fingers resting lightly on its surface. The Winters Family Foundation received a concerning report last year about irregularities in our financial distributions. Money that should have been going to scholarship recipients was being diverted. Henry's gaze swept around the table. "At first, I thought it was a clerical error. Then I suspected external fraud." Richard leaned forward. "Dad, why didn't you tell us? The board should have been notified." "Because," Henry continued, "the trail led to someone within this family." "Aye." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Michael felt a chill run down his spine, despite the warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth. "I've spent nights reviewing financial statements, making discreet phone calls to accountants, hiring a private investigator." Henry tapped the folder. "I had to be sure before I made any accusations." "Is this why you've been so secretive lately?" Emma asked, her voice small. "The locked study, the hushed phone calls?" Henry nodded. "I needed to protect the investigation. The more people who knew, the greater risk of alerting the person responsible." Michael's mind raced. He had been so certain of his father's cognitive decline that he'd never considered another explanation for the behavioral changes. The missed family dinners, the forgotten conversations, the distraction, all of it could be explained by Henry's secret investigation. "Who is it?" Tyler asked, eyes wide with the drama unfolding at what was supposed to be a simple family dinner. Henry didn't immediately answer. Instead, he opened the folder and removed several documents, spreading them across the table between half-empty plates and festive napkins. The Foundation's scholarship fund for first-generation college students was established with strict distribution guidelines, Henry explained, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had once commanded boardrooms. But over the past 3 years, approximately $450,000 has been diverted through a series of sophisticated transfers. Aunt Martha gasped. "Henry, that's terrible." "Yes, it is," Henry agreed, his expression grim. "Particularly because the money was redirected through a shell company called Pinnacle Ventures." He paused, looking directly at Michael. "A company registered to you, son." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Michael felt the air leave his lungs, aware of every eye at the table turning to him. That's ridiculous," he sputtered. "I don't know anything about any Pinnacle Ventures." Henry pushed a document toward him. "Your signature is on the incorporation papers. Your social security number, your home address." Michael stared at the paper, recognizing his signature with mounting horror. This has to be a mistake, or forgery. Dad, you can't seriously think I would steal from the Foundation. You've been under financial pressure since the Hamilton project fell through, Henry said quietly. Your architecture firm is struggling. Yes, I know about that, even though you've hidden it from the family. The Marina House, the private schools for the kids, Sophia's gallery renovation, it all adds up. Michael felt dizzy. It was true that his firm had hit hard times after a major development project collapsed, but he'd been handling it, scaling back, taking smaller commissions. He'd would never steal from his father's foundation. This is insane, Michael said, pushing back from the table. Is this some kind of twisted revenge because I suggested you might have cognitive issues, because I was concerned about you? No, Michael, Henry replied, his voice softening. This isn't revenge. This is the reason for my symptoms that concerned you so much. I've been working night and day to unravel this before confronting you. The Christmas lights blinked on and off in their programmed pattern, casting alternating shadows and illumination across the stricken faces of the family. Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding another inch to the silent white landscape. I didn't do this, Michael insisted, looking around the table at his siblings, his wife, his children. I would never betray Dad or the foundation like this. Sophia's hand had withdrawn from his. She was staring at the documents, her expression unreadable. Sophia? Michael turned to her, desperate for support. You know I wouldn't do this. His wife of 22 years looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. The signature does look like yours, Michael. Of course it looks like mine. Someone obviously forged it. Michael's voice rose in panic. He turned back to his father. Dad, there has to be another explanation. Someone set me up. Henry regarded his son with a mixture of sadness and resolution. I want to believe that, Michael, more than anything. Then believe it! Michael stood abruptly, his napkin falling to the floor. Because it's the truth. The perfect Christmas dinner lay in ruins, turkey growing cold, candles burning low as the Winters family faced their greatest crisis yet. Henry, whom Michael had accused of losing his mind, had just demonstrated that his mind was perhaps sharper than anyone had given him credit for. And Michael, who had initiated this confrontation, now found himself on the defensive, facing an accusation that threatened to destroy everything he held dear. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, the sound echoing through the tense silence of the dining room. Emma was the first to speak. Maybe we should all take a step back, she suggested, always the peacemaker. This is a lot to process on Christmas Eve. Richard pushed his chair back. I need some air. He left the room, James following close behind after an apologetic glance at the rest of the family. Henry gathered the documents back into the folder, his movements deliberate. I didn't want to do this tonight, he said quietly. But when you questioned my mental capacity in front of everyone, Michael, I felt I had no choice but to explain my recent behavior. Michael remained standing, hands braced against the table. This is a mistake, Dad. I'm telling you. Someone is setting me up. But who would do that? Tyler asked, his teenage face creased with confusion. And why? It was a good question, one that Michael's racing mind couldn't immediately answer. Who would have the knowledge, access, and motivation to frame him for embezzlement? Olivia, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly spoke up. Grandpa, can I see those papers again? Henry hesitated, then slid the folder across to his granddaughter. At 16, Olivia was already showing signs of the analytical mind that had made Henry such a successful engineer. She opened the folder and began studying the documents intently. I'm going to check on Richard, Aunt Martha announced, rising from her seat. As she passed Henry, she rested a hand briefly on his shoulder. This isn't your fault, she murmured, just loud enough for Michael to hear. Michael felt increasingly isolated as his family members seemed to accept his guilt without question. Even Sophia appeared uncertain, her eyes avoiding his as she mechanically began clearing dishes. Leave those, Margaret protested weakly. But Sophia continued stacking plates, clearly needing the distraction. Michael turned to his father. Dad, I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. I would never steal from the foundation. From you. Those scholarships mean everything to you. I know that. Henry's expression softened slightly. Then help me understand what happened, Michael, because all the evidence points to you. What evidence exactly? Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Besides some paperwork that could easily be forged. Henry reached into the folder and withdrew another document. Bank records showing transfers from Pinnacle Ventures to an offshore account. An account that has funded several significant purchases in your name, including the down payment on your summer house in Maine. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. That's impossible. We saved for years for that house. We have the bank statements to prove it. Do you? Henry asked quietly. Before Michael could respond, Olivia spoke up again. The dates are wrong. All eyes turned to her. What do you mean, sweetie? Sophia asked, pausing in her clearing of the table. Olivia pointed to a line on one of the documents. This incorporation paper for Pinnacle Ventures is dated March 15th, 2023. But the first transfer from the foundation to Pinnacle happened on February 28th, 2023. How could money be transferred to a company that didn't exist yet? A beat of silence followed as this information sank in. Henry frowned and reached for the paper. Let me see that. Olivia handed it over, and Henry studied it closely, his frown deepening. That's not possible. Unless the documents were created after the fact, Michael said, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. To cover someone else's tracks. Henry looked up at his son, uncertainty crossing his face for the first time. The private investigator provided these documents. He said they came directly from the State Business Registry. And who exactly is this investigator? Michael asked. Gerald Finnegan, Henry replied. He came highly recommended by Lawrence Drummond. Michael and Sophia exchanged a quick glance. Lawrence Drummond was the CEO of Drummond Development, the company whose sudden withdrawal had caused the collapse of Michael's Hamilton project and the subsequent financial strain on his architecture firm. Dad, Michael said carefully, I think you need to look more closely at Drummond and this investigator he recommended. The tension in the room shifted subtly. Emma, who had been standing by the doorway, moved back to the table. What are you suggesting, Michael? Michael's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. The Hamilton project was going to be revolutionary, sustainable urban living with affordable housing components. It would have put Drummond's more traditional developments to shame. When they pulled out as the primary investor, the whole project collapsed. You think Drummond is behind this? Henry asked, skepticism evident in his tone. That seems far-fetched, Michael. Does it? Michael countered. Drummond has been trying to get a position on the Winters Foundation board for years. You've always refused him. What better way to create an opening than to discredit your son and throw the family into chaos? Henry considered this, absently tracing the embossed family crest on the napkin before him. It's a theory, he conceded, but it doesn't explain how the money reached your accounts or how your signature appears on these documents. Actually, Olivia interjected again, I think I might know how the signature happened. She pulled out her phone and quickly navigated to a file. Dad, remember when you signed all those permission forms for my school trip to Washington last year? Michael nodded, not seeing the connection. The forms were digital, Olivia continued, showing her phone screen to the family. And one of them was a general release form for the Winters Foundation, allowing them to use photos of scholarship recipients with foundation board members for promotional materials. Understanding dawned on Henry's face. The signature could have been extracted from that digital form and repurposed onto these incorporation documents, Michael finished, the pieces coming together. A heavy silence fell over the room as the family processed this new possibility. The accusation against Michael had seemed so solid just moments ago, but now cracks were appearing in the foundation of evidence. Henry stood slowly, leaning slightly on the table for support. Not from mental confusion, Michael now realized, but from the physical toll of months spent conducting a secret investigation. I need to make a call, Henry said, his voice taking on a new edge of determination. To Gerald Finnegan. As Henry left the room, phone in hand, the remaining family members exchanged uncertain glances. The Christmas dinner lay abandoned, the festive atmosphere utterly destroyed. But a new energy had replaced the earlier tension, the energy of a family potentially reuniting against an external threat rather than fracturing from within. "I still don't understand how the money ended up in your accounts," Sophia said quietly to Michael. "Neither do I," Michael admitted, "but I'm going to find out." The study had always been Henry's sanctum, a place of leather-bound books, the lingering scent of pipe tobacco, though he'd quit smoking 15 years ago, and the collected memorabilia of a life well lived. Now, it had transformed into an impromptu war room. Henry paced behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, while Michael, Richard, Emma, and Aunt Martha waited tensely. Sophia had taken the teenagers to the kitchen, ostensibly for dessert, but really to shield them from whatever might unfold next. "Finnegan isn't answering," Henry said finally, setting down his phone with a frustrated sigh. "Which is unusual. He's been extremely responsive throughout this investigation." "Too responsive, perhaps," Richard suggested. He had returned from his cooling-off walk with a clearer perspective. If Michael's theory about Drummond is correct, Finnegan might be deliberately unavailable now that questions are being raised. Henry nodded grimly. "I should have been more cautious. Lawrence Drummond has always been persistent about involving himself in the Foundation." "Why?" Emma asked, perched on the arm of one of the leather chairs. "What's so important about getting on the board?" "Prestige, for one thing," Henry replied. "But more importantly, influence over where the grants and scholarships go." Michael leaned against the bookshelf, thinking. The Hamilton Project would have created affordable housing for exactly the kind of students your scholarships support, Dad. Drummond's luxury developments target a completely different market. So Drummond sabotages Michael's project, then frames him for embezzlement, potentially securing a board seat while eliminating a business competitor, Richard summarized. "It's diabolical, but it makes a certain kind of sense." "We need proof," Henry said firmly. "Theories won't help us recover the missing funds or clear Michael's name." Aunt Martha, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "The Christmas party." All eyes turned to her. "What Christmas party?" Michael asked. "The Drummond Development Holiday Gala," Martha explained. "It's tomorrow night. Eleanor and I received invitations. Lawrence always invites the widows of the old guard." She smiled slightly. "He thinks we're harmless old ladies who might leave his company something in our wills." Henry's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Finnegan might be there. More importantly," Martha continued, "Drummond's office will be empty. And I happen to know that Eleanor's late husband, Judge Wilson, left her a set of master keys to the Drummond building. He was their legal counsel for decades." Michael stared at his aunt in astonishment. "Are you suggesting we break into Drummond's office on Christmas Day?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "Not breaking in if you have keys, dear. Besides, what better time? The building will be deserted." "That's not exactly legal, Aunt Martha," Emma pointed out hesitantly. "Neither is framing my nephew for embezzlement," Martha retorted. "Sometimes you have to bend the rules to find the truth." Henry drummed his fingers on the desk, considering. "We're not stealing anything or damaging property. We're just looking for information that might already rightfully belong to the Foundation." Richard laughed incredulously. "I can't believe we're actually considering this." "Do you have a better idea?" Michael asked, surprising himself with how quickly he'd embraced the plan. "Because I'm not going to let my reputation or Dad's foundation be destroyed by Lawrence Drummond." The study door opened, and Sophia entered with a tray of coffee cups. "The kids are watching It's a Wonderful Life in the den," she reported. "What did I miss?" Michael exchanged a look with his father. "We're planning a little Christmas mission," he said carefully. To his surprise, Sophia set down the tray and nodded firmly. "Good, because I've been doing some digging of my own." She pulled out her tablet and opened a financial app. "I've been going through our accounts, and I found something strange. The deposits for the main house didn't come from our savings account as I thought. They came from an account I've never seen before, one that was opened in both our names but with statements going to your office address. Michael stared at the screen. I never opened this account. I've never even seen this bank's name before. Exactly, Sophia said grimly. Someone has gone to a lot of trouble to make it look like you've been receiving stolen money. And I want to know who. The determination in her voice erased any lingering doubt Michael might have had about whether she believed him. Relief washed over him, followed quickly by renewed anger at whoever was trying to destroy his family. Henry looked around at the faces of his family members, Michael's resolve, Richard's skepticism slowly giving way to support, Emma's concern, Martha's surprising craftiness, and Sophia's fierce loyalty. Something shifted in his expression, a new light entering his eyes. When I started investigating the missing funds, he said slowly, I never imagined it would lead to this. I thought I was protecting the foundation from a thief within my own family. Instead, I find my family uniting to protect the foundation and each other. That's what families do, Dad, Emma said softly. Henry nodded, a small smile forming. Then it settled. Tomorrow, while Lawrence Drummond and his associates celebrate Christmas at their gala, we'll be paying a visit to his office. Our Winters family Christmas caper, Richard said with a shake of his head. Not exactly how I imagined spending the holiday. Better than continuing to suspect Michael of theft, Henry replied, his voice heavy with regret. Son, It's okay, Dad, Michael interrupted. You were protecting something important to you. I understand. Still, Henry insisted, I should have trusted you more. I let the evidence override my instincts. The evidence was convincing, Michael acknowledged, but not as convincing as family loyalty should have been. I made the same mistake when I assumed you were losing your mind. The two men regarded each other across the study, decades of complicated father-son dynamics hanging in the air between them. Then, wordlessly, Henry stepped forward and embraced his son. Michael returned the hug tightly, feeling something heal between them. Well, Aunt Martha said briskly, breaking the emotional moment, if we're going to commit light breaking and entering tomorrow, I suggest we all get a good night's sleep and perhaps finish that excellent Christmas pudding Margaret prepared. As the family filed out of the study, returning to the abandoned dinner and the waiting dessert, a new sense of purpose had replaced the earlier tension and accusations. The Christmas celebration had been derailed, certainly, but not destroyed. Instead, it had transformed into something else entirely, a rallying point for a family discovering that their bonds were stronger than they had realized. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the estate in a pristine blanket of white. Tomorrow would bring challenges and revelations, but tonight the Winters family would salvage what they could of their Christmas Eve, fortifying themselves for the unexpected adventure that lay ahead. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright, the night snowfall glittering under a perfect blue sky. Under normal circumstances, the Winters household would have been filled with the sounds of present opening, coffee brewing, and Margaret's special cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. Instead, the dining room had become a strategic planning center. Henry sat at the head of the table, no longer the confused elderly man Michael had mistaken him for, but the sharp CEO who had built one of the country's most respected engineering firms. Spread before him were blueprints of the Drummond Development Headquarters, obtained through a quick call to a former colleague who had worked on the building's renovation 5 years ago. The executive offices are here, Henry said, pointing to the top floor of the 12-story building. Drummond's private office is in the northeast corner with the best views of the city. Typical, Richard muttered. What exactly are we looking for? Emma asked, nervously twisting her wedding ring. Of all the siblings, she seemed the most uncomfortable with their improvised mission. Anything connecting Drummond to the diverted funds, Henry replied. Correspondence with Finnegan, documentation about Pinnacle Ventures, evidence of how they accessed our accounts. Michael studied the blueprints, his architect's eye identifying entry points and potential security challenges. Aunt Martha, you said Eleanor has keys, but what about security systems, card readers, cameras? Martha smiled mysteriously. Eleanor's late husband didn't just leave her keys. He left her the security codes too. Judge Wilson was thorough and perhaps a bit paranoid. He kept detailed records of everything related to his clients, even after retirement. Is Eleanor comfortable with us using this information? Sophia asked. Eleanor, Martha said with a slight smile, is bringing the keys and codes to us personally. She should be here any minute. She was quite animated when I told her about our suspicions regarding Lawrence Drummond. Apparently, she never liked him, even when her husband was representing the company. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Margaret hurried to answer it, returning moments later with Eleanor Wilson, an elegant woman in her 70s, wrapped in a luxurious fur coat dusted with snow. "Merry Christmas, conspirators!" Eleanor greeted them with a mischievous smile that belied her refined appearance. She withdrew an envelope from her purse and placed it dramatically on the table. "Everything you need is in there. The master key card, the service elevator code, and the override for the executive floor security system." Henry stood to greet her. "Eleanor, I can't thank you enough for this." She waved away his gratitude. "Lawrence Drummond has been corrupting everything my Herbert built for decades. If he's finally overreached himself, I want to be part of bringing him down." Her eyes sparkled with determination. "Besides, it's the most excitement I've had since my skydiving trip to New Zealand last spring." Martha nodded approvingly at her friend. "I told you she'd be on board." Michael opened the envelope, examining its contents. "This is incredible, Mrs. Wilson, but are you sure these codes still work? Security systems get updated. The override code is architectural," Eleanor explained, "built into the system itself. Herbert insisted on it as a condition of his legal approval for the security installation. As for the key card, it's a master, programmed at the highest authorization level." "Why would Judge Wilson need that kind of access?" Richard asked curiously. Eleanor and Martha exchanged a knowing look. "Herbert believed in having leverage," Eleanor said simply. "Now, who's actually going into the building? I assume not everyone?" "Michael and I will go," Henry decided. "As the accused and the accuser, we have the most at stake." "I'm coming too," Sophia said firmly. "3 sets of eyes are better than 2. "The rest of you should attend the Drummond Gala," Henry continued. "Keep an eye on Lawrence. Make sure he stays occupied." "I am excellent at being distracting," Martha assured him. "What about us?" Tyler asked from the doorway, where he and Olivia had been listening. "We want to help clear Dad's name, too." Henry hesitated, looking at Michael and Sophia. "You two stay with Richard and Emma," Michael decided, "but keep your phones on. If we need research support or quick information, you're our backup team." The teenagers seemed satisfied with this role, nodding seriously. "We should go during the height of the gala," Henry said, looking at the invitation Martha had provided. "It starts at 7, so we'll enter the building at 8:30. That gives us maximum time with minimum risk of encountering any staff who might be working on Christmas Day." "What if you get caught?" Emma asked, voicing the concern everyone had been avoiding. "We're not stealing anything," Henry reminded her. "At worst, we're trespassing. And given my reputation in the business community and the circumstances, I doubt Drummond would press charges. It would raise too many questions. Besides," Eleanor added with a wink, "if anyone asks, you're there at my request to retrieve some of Herbert's personal files that were never returned after his retirement. I've prepared a letter to that effect." She patted her purse. "Always have a cover story, my dears." As the family continued refining their plan, Michael felt a strange mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. 24 hours ago, he had been preparing to confront his father about his apparent cognitive decline. Now, they were planning what amounted to a heist, albeit a benign one, to clear his name and potentially expose a sophisticated financial fraud. Life, Michael reflected, could change direction with breathtaking speed. Like the moment when his father had laughed in response to the accusation of mental decline, that serene, unexpected laugh that had signaled not deterioration, but determination. That laugh had been the first indication that Michael had completely misread the situation, that the apparent symptoms of confusion masked a mind working overtime on a complex problem. As the grandfather clock chimed noon, the family dispersed to prepare for their respective roles in the evening's activities. Michael found himself alone with his father in the study once more. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "I need to apologize again for last night, for thinking you were declining." Henry sighed, settling into his leather chair. "Your concern came from a place of love, Michael, and my behavior gave you reason to worry. I became so focused on tracking down the missing funds that I neglected everything else, including reassuring my family about my well-being." "Still," Michael insisted, "I should have trusted you more." "As I should have trusted you," Henry countered. "We both made assumptions based on incomplete information. The question now is whether we can correct our mistakes and find the truth." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of the evening's mission settling on his shoulders. "Do you think we'll find what we need at Drummond's office?" "I don't know," Henry admitted. "But I do know this. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. As a family." The winter sun cast long shadows across the study as father and son sat in companionable silence, preparing mentally for the unconventional Christmas adventure that lay ahead. Outside, carolers could be heard making their way down the street, their voices carrying the traditional songs of the season, songs about peace, joy, and miracles. The Winters family could use a miracle right now, Michael thought. But perhaps they already had one. The miracle of renewed trust and unified purpose emerging from what had begun as the most painful confrontation of their lives. The Drummond Development Headquarters stood like a glittering sentinel against the night sky, its glass facade reflecting the Christmas lights of the city below. From their position in the parking garage across the street, Michael, Henry, and Sophia could see that most of the building was dark, except for the penthouse level, where the gala was in full swing. "Richard just texted," Sophia reported, checking her phone. "Drummond is holding court by the champagne fountain, apparently regaling guests with stories of his philanthropic efforts." She rolled her eyes. "The irony is rich." Henry adjusted the lapels of his overcoat. The three of them were dressed formally, as if they too were headed to the gala, their cover story if questioned. "Eleanor's car service should be pulling up any minute. We'll enter through the side entrance as planned." Michael nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. Despite the justness of their cause, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line, that they were becoming as underhanded as those they suspected of framing him. "Having second thoughts?" Henry asked, noticing his son's expression. "Just wondering if there was another way," Michael admitted, "a more conventional approach." "We tried conventional," Sophia reminded him gently. "Your father spent months investigating through proper channels, only to be led down a false trail. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire." A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and the driver, evidently briefed by Eleanor, gave them a discreet nod. They crossed the street quickly, the cold December air biting at their exposed faces. The side entrance to the Drummond building was utilitarian, lacking the grand revolving doors of the main lobby. Eleanor's keycard worked flawlessly, emitting a soft beep as the door unlocked. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a service corridor dimly lit by emergency lighting. "Service elevator is this way," Henry murmured, leading them deeper into the building. Their footsteps echoed slightly on the polished floor, the sound unnervingly loud in the empty space. The service elevator required both the key card and a code which Eleanor had provided. As they ascended toward the executive floor, Michael found himself mentally reviewing the building's layout from the blueprints they had studied. Drummond's office was at the end of the main corridor, past his assistant's desk and through a set of double doors. When the elevator doors opened on the executive level, they were met with darkness, broken only by the dim glow of emergency exit signs and the distant muffled sounds of the gala several floors above them. "Stay close," Henry whispered, leading the way with surprising confidence for a man in his 70s. They moved quietly through the deserted executive suite, past silent cubicles and darkened conference rooms. Drummond's executive assistant's desk sat like a sentinel before the imposing double doors of his office. Sophia tried the handles. Locked. "Now what?" she whispered. Henry produced Eleanor's master key card. This should work on any door in the building. He swiped it through the reader beside the doors, and they were rewarded with a soft click as the lock disengaged. The office beyond was spacious and opulent, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the snow-covered city. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, while a seating area with leather couches occupied the other. Framed awards and photographs covered one wall, Drummond shaking hands with politicians, celebrities, and business leaders. "We need to be quick and methodical," Henry said, moving toward the desk. "Michael, check the filing cabinets. Sophia, see if there's a safe or hidden compartment. Someone as paranoid as Drummond would likely keep sensitive documents secure." They worked in near silence. The only sounds, the soft rustling of papers and the occasional opening and closing of drawers. Michael found himself thinking of Christmas mornings past, of his children eagerly searching for hidden presents, not unlike how they were now searching for hidden evidence. "Nothing in the files," Michael reported after 10 minutes of careful searching. "Just standard business documents, all seemingly legitimate." Sophia had been examining the wood paneling on one wall. "There's something here," she called softly, "a seam that doesn't match the others." Henry and Michael joined her, studying the barely perceptible line in the expensive walnut paneling. Henry ran his fingers along it, pressing gently until they heard a faint click. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a small room beyond, a private office within the office. "Bingo!" Sophia breathed. The hidden room contained a smaller desk, a computer, and several filing cabinets. Unlike the immaculate main office, this space had a lived-in quality: coffee cups, scattered notes, and an open laptop. "He must have been working in here right before leaving for the gala," Henry observed, moving toward the computer. "Let's see if he left anything accessible." To their surprise and relief, the laptop was unlocked. Drummond had apparently stepped away, expecting to return shortly. Henry sat down at the desk and began navigating through the files. "Here," he said after a moment, his voice tight with excitement. "Emails between Drummond and Finnegan, going back more than a year." Michael and Sophia crowded behind him, reading over his shoulder. The emails detailed the plan: how Finnegan would create false evidence implicating Michael in the embezzlement, how Drummond would provide Henry with just enough information to make him suspicious of his son, and how they would ultimately use the family crisis to position Drummond for a seat on the foundation board. "There's more," Henry said, clicking on another folder. Financial records showing the actual path of the diverted funds, not to Michael at all, but to offshore accounts controlled by Drummond himself. "And look," Sophia pointed to another document on the screen, plans for development projects that would directly compete with Michael's Hamilton project, using designs that look suspiciously similar to Michael's original concepts. "He was stealing my ideas while framing me for stealing money?" Michael said incredulously. "The man's audacity is almost impressive." Henry quickly connected a small USB drive to the computer, copying the incriminating files. "This is everything we need to clear your name, Michael, and to press charges against Drummond and Finnegan." As the files transferred, Michael wandered back into the main office, looking at the photographs of Drummond with the powerful and famous. In each image, Drummond wore the same practiced smile, charming, but somehow empty. Michael wondered how many of those smiling alongside him knew the man's true nature. A phone buzzed. Sophia's. She checked it quickly. Text from Richard. "The gala is breaking up earlier than expected. Some weather advisory about roads freezing. We need to hurry." Henry removed the USB drive and carefully closed the laptop exactly as they had found it. They retreated from the hidden office, making sure the panel closed completely behind them. "We have what we came for," Henry said. "Let's go." They had just reached the double doors when they heard the distinctive sound of the executive elevator arriving on their floor. Footsteps approached, more than one person. "Quick!" Michael whispered, pulling his father and Sophia behind a large decorative screen that partially concealed a small sitting area. They crouched down, barely breathing, as the footsteps grew louder. The office doors opened and lights flicked on. Through a small gap in the screen, Michael could see Lawrence Drummond himself, accompanied by Gerald Finnegan, the private investigator who had provided Henry with the falsified evidence against Michael. "The gala was becoming tedious," Drummond was saying as he strode to the bar cart in the corner and poured 2 glasses of scotch. All those meaningless holiday pleasantries, and seeing the Winters clan there, putting on brave faces despite their family drama, was particularly satisfying. "Has Henry made his move yet?" Finnegan asked, accepting the offered drink. "Not yet, but he will. Once the holidays are over, he'll have no choice but to bring the evidence to the foundation board. His precious son will be disgraced, and I'll step in as the voice of reason, offering to help salvage the foundation's reputation." Drummond smiled coldly. "By this time next year, I'll control the distribution of every Winters Foundation scholarship and grant." "And the Hamilton Project land?" Finnegan prompted. "Already being rezoned for my luxury development. Without Michael's firm in the picture, there was no one to champion that ridiculous affordable housing component." Drummond sipped his scotch. "Speaking of which, has there been any blowback about the signature forgery?" "None. The digital extraction was flawless, and with the money trail leading directly to accounts in Michael's name, there's no way for him to prove his innocence." Finnegan chuckled. "The beauty is that even if he suspects what happened, he can't prove anything without admitting to the embezzlement." Michael felt Sophia's hand tighten around his. He glanced at his father, whose face had hardened into a mask of cold fury. "I should check on the latest transfers," Drummond said, moving toward the hidden office door. "We need to move the last of the foundation money before the new year." As Drummond reached for the concealed panel, the 3 intruders tensed, knowing discovery was imminent. But before Drummond could open the hidden door, his phone rang loudly. He checked the screen and frowned. "It's my wife, probably wondering where I disappeared to." He answered with a forced cheerfulness. "Yes, dear. Just had to step away for a moment of quiet." "What?" "No, that won't be necessary. Fine, I'll be right back up." He hung up with a sigh. "Apparently my presence is required for the final toast. We'll have to finish this later." He knocked back the rest of his scotch. "Let's go back up before she sends a search party." Finnegan drained his glass as well, and the 2 men departed, leaving the lights on in their wake. Only when the sound of the elevator had faded completely did Michael, Henry, and Sophia emerge from their hiding place. "We need to get out of here. Now," Henry said urgently. They could return any minute. They hurried from the office, not bothering with stealth now, and took the service elevator down to the ground floor. The side exit deposited them back on the street, where Eleanor's car was still waiting. As they settled into the back seat, the tension finally broke. Sophia let out a shaky laugh. "I feel like I'm in a spy movie." "A successful one," Henry added, patting the pocket containing the USB drive. "We have everything we need." The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the light Christmas night traffic. Snow had begun to fall again, adding to the holiday atmosphere that seemed so at odds with what they had just experienced. "What now?" Michael asked. Henry's expression was resolute. "Now we go home and enjoy what's left of our Christmas. Tomorrow, we contact the authorities and my attorneys. Drummond and Finnegan won't know what hit them." Michael nodded, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over him. His name would be cleared, his father's foundation protected, and his professional reputation salvaged. But more important than any of that was the knowledge that his family had stood by him when it mattered most, had fought for him when the evidence seemed overwhelming. "I never should have doubted you, Dad," Michael said quietly. "All those symptoms I thought pointed to cognitive decline. They were just signs of how hard you were working to uncover the truth." Henry smiled, the lines in his face softening. "And I never should have suspected you of betrayal, son. I let evidence override my heart." "We both made mistakes," Michael acknowledged, "but we're fixing them together." As they drove through the snowy streets toward home, Michael thought about the unexpected journey this Christmas had taken them on. What had begun with an accusation at the dinner table had transformed into a mission of justice and redemption. The holiday that had seemed ruined just 24 hours ago now felt more meaningful than any Christmas in memory. Back at the Winters estate, the rest of the family was waiting anxiously. The teenagers rushed to greet them as they entered, followed by Richard, Emma, Aunt Martha, and Eleanor. "Well," Richard demanded, "did you find anything?" Henry held up the USB drive triumphantly. "Everything, and more." As they gathered in the living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling in the background, Henry and Michael recounted their adventure, the hidden office, the incriminating files, and the narrow escape. "We literally heard Drummond and Finnegan confessing to the whole scheme," Sophia added, still looking slightly stunned by the reality of what they had done. "This calls for a celebration," Aunt Martha declared, heading for the wine cabinet. "A proper Christmas toast." While Martha poured drinks for the adults and sparkling cider for the teenagers, Michael found himself looking around at his family, at the faces that had been clouded with doubt and suspicion just a day ago, now bright with relief and solidarity. When everyone had a glass, Henry stood and raised his. "To family," he said simply, "who stand together against any storm." "To family," they echoed, glasses clinking in the warm light of the Christmas tree. Later, as the household finally settled into sleep in the early hours of the morning, Michael stood at the window of his childhood bedroom, watching the snow continue to fall. Sophia joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "Quite a Christmas," she murmured against his shoulder. "Not exactly the peaceful holiday we planned," Michael agreed with a small laugh. "But maybe exactly the one we needed," Sophia suggested. "Think about it. Your father's mental acuity is confirmed, your name will be cleared, and the family is closer than ever, all because of a misunderstanding at Christmas dinner." Michael turned to face her, taking in the face he had loved for more than 2 decades. "When I stood up at that table and accused my father of losing his mind, I never imagined where it would lead." "Life rarely follows the path we expect," Sophia said softly. "Sometimes it takes an unexpected turn to show us what truly matters." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the estate in a fresh blanket of white, nature's way of offering a clean slate, a new beginning. And inside, the Winters family slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the new year might bring, they would face them together, stronger for having weathered this unexpected Christmas storm. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. Your support helps us continue bringing you captivating narratives that touch your heart and spark your imagination. Until next time, thank you for listening.